What if I told you the man behind cancer hospitals, children's charities, and billion-dollar skyscrapers was also the mastermind of a secret empire built on silence, seduction, and control? What if I told you he had over 200 young women, not just lovers, but contracts, rules, schedules? And what if one of them didn't follow the rules? Tonight, we take you inside the shocking story of Victor Langston, the 80-year-old CEO found stabbed 42 times, naked in his mansion, and the 23-year-old woman who took his power, his secrets, and finally, his life. The 911 call came in at exactly 10:27 p.m. The voice on the other end was trembling, shaking, barely coherent. "This is Lucia. I work at the Langston estate. He's dead. Oh God. He's naked and there's blood everywhere." Within minutes, red and blue lights sliced through the darkness of Beverly Hills. The Langston mansion wasn't just another home. It was a 24,000 square foot fortress tucked deep in a canyon, gated, ivy-covered, impossible to see from the road. The kind of place where secrets could die quietly or explode violently. Victor Langston's body was found face down in his master bedroom, lying atop $12,000 Egyptian cotton sheets. He was completely naked, his skin pale, his blood soaked into the mattress like ink. The wounds? 42 stab marks. Some shallow, some deep, some almost surgical, others feral. The scene was brutal, but clean. That was the first red flag. Detectives from the LAPD's Homicide Division arrived fast. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No alarms tripped. No valuables stolen. His platinum Patek Philippe was still on his wrist. His custom safe was closed. His wallet and phone sat neatly on the nightstand. And yet, every security camera in the house, every single one, had been disabled exactly 2 hours earlier. Accident? Unlikely. It was the kind of precision that didn't feel random. It felt planned. News traveled fast. By morning, helicopters buzzed overhead. Reporters crowded the gated entrance. Words like assassination and sex scandal were already floating on live TV. Victor Langston wasn't just a man. He was a brand. Founder and CEO of Langston Global Properties, a real estate empire with holdings in 8 countries. His name stamped on skyscrapers, private resorts, and cancer wings in luxury hospitals. He was 80 years old, a self-made billionaire, a beloved philanthropist, a father of 3, a grandfather of 5, and now, a naked corpse in his own bed. The headlines wrote themselves. Billionaire found dead in Beverly Hills mansion. CEO of Langston Global stabbed 42 times. Murder or revenge? Philanthropist dies in apparent sex crime. LAPD investigating. The media painted the picture of a powerful man taken down by a random act of violence. A burglary gone wrong. A twisted home invasion. But Detective Marlon Briggs, 18 years on the force, didn't buy it. Not for a second. He stood in that bedroom long after the forensics team had packed up, eyes scanning the details, the shape of the blood spray, the angle of the body, the perfectly wiped doorknobs, the faint scent of jasmine perfume still lingering in the air. Something didn't sit right. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't random. This was personal. And the deeper Briggs looked, the uglier the truth would become. Because behind the smiling press photos and gala speeches, behind the marble staircases and 5-star donations, Victor Langston wasn't who the world thought he was. He wasn't just a loving husband. He wasn't just a generous billionaire. Victor Langston had another life, one built on manipulation, control, and over 200 beautiful young women. And one of them had just made sure his story ended in blood. Victor Langston didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a predator. It happened slowly, strategically, like his buildings, one steel beam at a time. It started in 1989. Langston Global was still a mid-tier real estate firm back then, just another name in the LA skyline war. Victor had money, but not power. Influence, but not immunity. And that terrified him. At a networking event in Palm Desert, Victor met a girl named Camila, 22, fresh off a bus from Santa Fe, waiting tables in sequins and heels too small. She smiled when she spoke, even when her eyes didn't. Victor offered her a ride back to the city. By the time they reached downtown, she was in his bed. She wasn't the first, but she was the one that taught him the formula. He paid her rent, gave her a phone, bought her a Gucci bag she couldn't pronounce. In exchange, she made him feel adored, listened to, needed. For the first time, Victor tasted the high of total control. Not just over a company, but over a person. A fragile, grateful person with no other options. Camila stayed 6 months. Then she overdosed in a motel in Glendale. Victor didn't panic. He paid off the owner, replaced the mattress, paid for the cremation, and made sure her parents were never contacted. No police report, no obituary, just a whisper lost in the LA smog. That was when he realized, in this city, with enough money, you could bury anything. From that moment, Victor began to refine the process. Each woman was selected with more care. No family in town, no college ties, no nosy roommates, just enough desperation to make the offer feel like salvation. He hired lawyers to draft NDAs that could make a senator sweat, built shell companies to process payments, developed a 3-tier vetting system with his assistant. Each girl got a nickname, a file, a code number. He never hit them, never shouted. He just rewired their reality. You're special. I see something in you no one else does. If you ever talk about this, I'll ruin you. And they believed him, because Victor Langston didn't act like a monster. He acted like a savior. By 1999, there were over 20 women under his payroll. Most stayed quiet. A few disappeared. One tried to go public, but was met with a 6-figure lawsuit and photos from her escort past mysteriously leaked online. She retracted her story. She vanished too. Victor didn't smile about it. He didn't gloat. He simply moved on to the next. In 2007, a former receptionist at Langston Global filed a harassment complaint, alleging that Victor had offered her a promotion in exchange for a weekend in Napa. The complaint was buried before it reached HR. The woman? Fired for performance issues. Her LinkedIn account deleted. No firm would touch her after that. Victor understood leverage like no one else, and he used it relentlessly. Every corner of his world was controlled. From the scented candles in his penthouse to the media influencers he paid to polish his image. Even his philanthropy was strategic, donations timed to distract from lawsuits, interviews scheduled the day after a scandal leaked. But the most chilling part? He didn't think he was evil. He thought he was owed. I built this empire, he once told his driver, unprovoked. Every girl in this city wanted a shortcut. I just provide the toll booth. And so, the network grew. By the time Aria Taylor entered the picture, there were over 200 women, carefully managed, discreetly paid, endlessly silenced. To the outside world, he was a genius. To the girls, he was a god they weren't allowed to question. But gods fall too. And Victor Langston? He was about to meet one who could burn Olympus to the ground. In the public eye, Victor Langston was untouchable. He was the man in the crisp navy suits and silk ties, always flanked by his elegant wife Helen, never a strand of hair out of place. They were the definition of old money grace, always front row at charity balls, always framed in golden light during fundraising galas. He once gave a $10 million donation to a children's cancer hospital, then humbly stepped aside during the ribbon-cutting ceremony so the staff could shine. The press adored him. Politicians praised him. Even church leaders in Los Angeles called him a blessing sent by God. But the God Victor Langston served behind closed doors was power. And the gospel he preached? Control. The LAPD's forensic accountants moved fast. Emergency subpoenas, wiretaps, digital forensics, everything was on the table. And what they found was beyond anything they expected. Buried under layers of real estate documents, shell corporations, and offshore trusts were hundreds of monthly payments, each one labeled consulting or marketing strategy. But these weren't consultants. They weren't strategists. They were women. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Names no one in Victor's companies recognized. Names like Aubrey Lane, Talia Simone, Jasmine Hart, Aria Taylor. And those names? They led to penthouse leases, leased Mercedes-Benz S, and monthly deposits ranging from $8,000 to $25,000. All paid like clockwork. the first of every month. No questions asked. Some of the recipients were Instagram models. Others were dancers, students, aspiring actresses. A few were as young as 21. All were beautiful. All shared one common link. They'd signed NDAs, all funneled through legal teams tied to Langston Media Group or Lang Pro Holdings. At first, detectives thought it might be an elaborate sugar baby operation. But it was more than that. Victor didn't just pay for sex. He built an ecosystem, a network of control dependency, an underground world where young women were recruited, kept, rotated, and eventually replaced. Each of them had a handler, a private concierge, and a separate set of instructions. They were expected to attend retreats, show up at exclusive dinner parties, and occasionally travel for media appearances that never existed. Some girls lived in furnished penthouses where even the linens were custom embroidered. Others were flown in and out of LA on Langston's private jet, with nothing but a burner phone and a list of rules. No outside visitors. No social media posts with location tags. No talking to the media. Ever. And it all happened right under the nose of Helen Langston, his wife of 52 years. Investigators found no proof she was involved, but there were signs she'd looked the other way. Signs she knew. The separate guest house Victor used for business meetings. The second cell phone she wasn't allowed to touch. The random 4-day trips to Palm Springs to meet investors. Helen had stopped asking questions years ago, but now the world was asking all of them. How did no one know? How did a man so public, so beloved, manage to hide over 200 mistresses for more than a decade? Simple. Victor Langston didn't just own property. He owned people. One of his former assistants, granted immunity in exchange for testimony, described it best. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He'd just make you feel like without him, you were nothing. And after a while, you believed it. Victor had spent his life building towers of steel and glass. But the real prison he created was made of silence. And somewhere inside that prison, one woman had finally broken out. Her name was Aria Taylor. And she wasn't going to just disappear like the rest. Her name was Aria Taylor, 23, born in Fresno. A face that could stop traffic, a body sculpted for attention, and a gaze that flickered between innocence and calculation like a light switch. But long before Aria became the woman who could silence a room with a stare, she was just a girl no one listened to. Her childhood was a quiet war zone. Fresno wasn't kind to girls like Aria, the kind born to mothers too broken to care and fathers too absent to remember birthdays. Her mother, Linda, had once been beautiful, until meth took that beauty, burned it into ash behind her hollowed eyes and jittery hands. By the time Aria was 10, she'd learned how to mix powdered formula for her baby half-sister. By 12, she was hiding knives under her mattress in case her mother's latest boyfriend stumbled into her room. The first time she ran away, she was 13. She got as far as Modesto before the cops picked her up. The second time, she didn't get caught. She lived in shelters, slept on floors, learned fast and hard that the world didn't save girls like her. It only took them apart in slow, invisible ways. By 15, she had a fake ID. By 16, she had a boyfriend twice her age and a scar on her stomach from when he shoved her into a table during an argument. No police report, no hospital visit, just a cheap tattoo over the scar, 3 black roses. A lie pretending to be beauty. But Aria didn't want to be saved. She wanted to survive. She lied her way into go-sees for local modeling gigs. Never got paid. Sometimes left with bruises. Sometimes worse. She smiled anyway. Told herself it was temporary. She never believed in fairy tales. But she believed in leverage. By 19, she'd made it to LA. Slept in a Nissan Sentra behind a 24-hour fitness. Showered at gas stations. Lived on granola bars and sugar-free Red Bull. She started hustling Instagram. Bought fake followers, messaged photographers pretending to be represented by a fake agency she invented, created an illusion that made her untouchable, even when she had nothing. The internet made her visible, but it was Victor Langston who made her dangerous. He wasn't her first benefactor, but he was the first who made her feel like she could finally stop running. The moment they met, Aria knew she had a window. He looked at her the way men look at things they think they already own. But Arya didn't flinch. She leaned in. She knew the game. What she didn't expect was how much she would love the power. Victor gave her keys to a penthouse in Century City, but she gave him something rarer, submission that felt like worship. She studied what he liked. The way he liked wine poured, how he liked silence during dinner, how he hated being questioned but loved being admired. She made herself into a mirror. Every reflection he wanted, she became. But deep inside, Arya was watching, cataloging, memorizing every weakness. For a while, she even let herself believe the fantasy, that she was the only one, that he would really leave Helen, that she had earned her way out of hell. Until Santa Barbara, the vineyard, the hot tub, the necklace. She didn't scream. She didn't confront him, because little girls scream when they're hurt. Arya Taylor wasn't a little girl anymore. She drove back to L.A. that night in silence. No music, no tears. And when she got home, she didn't pack. She didn't plan to leave. She opened her laptop, created a folder, and titled it with one word: taxes. Inside it, she saved the first screenshot. That night, something inside Arya stopped being human. Not because she was betrayed, but because she finally understood something terrifying. Victor Langston didn't love her. He collected her, just like the rest. And one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this year, but one day, he would throw her away. Like Camila, like Marissa, like the one who vanished in 2011 and never made it into the company's records. Victor had left a trail of ghosts behind him. Arya decided she'd be the one to haunt him, not to warn him, to destroy him. Not because she was broken, but because she'd been rebuilt, one lie at a time. And Victor Langston had no idea that the girl he thought he owned would be the one to end his story. When Arya walked into a room, people forgot what they were saying. She didn't just turn heads, she turned control back onto the men who thought they held it. But it wasn't always like that. Arya had grown up learning how to survive, not shine. Her mother overdosed in their kitchen when Arya was 12. Her stepfather ran a chain of seedy strip clubs across Central California and used his fists to teach obedience. Arya left home at 15, lived in group homes, on couches, sometimes in her car. She lied her way into modeling gigs and manipulated her way into safety. She didn't want love. She wanted leverage. So when she met Victor Langston at an art auction in West Hollywood, she didn't see a charming old billionaire. She saw a target. Victor, of course, saw her too. He could always spot hunger, not just for money, but for protection, power, validation. They met over champagne and small talk. She wore a red dress she borrowed. He wore confidence like a crown. Within 10 minutes, he handed her a prepaid cell phone, preloaded with only one number. Not a business card, not a pitch, just a phone. That's how it always began. By the following week, Arya had been moved into a penthouse in Century City, fully furnished. She had a private driver, a stylist, a trainer, and a black Amex in her name, billed directly to Langston Media Group. She deleted old contacts, dropped out of college, unfollowed every friend from her past. She didn't need them anymore. She had become the center of Victor Langston's private universe. At least that's what she thought. Victor didn't introduce Arya to the other girls all at once. It was gradual, like introducing a queen to her court. A private dinner here, a wine tasting there. Some girls were catty, others submissive. A few tried to warn her, "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." But Arya believed she was different. She wasn't just some influencer with a nice smile. She was the one. Victor whispered promises at night. "I'm changing my will. Helen's not going to last forever. You'll be Mrs. Langston soon. I've never felt this alive with anyone." And Arya ate it up, because for the first time in her life, someone powerful didn't just use her, he elevated her. Or so she thought. Then came Santa Barbara, Victor's private vineyard, an invitation-only weekend. Arya arrived early, like always, in a satin dress and stilettos she couldn't walk in. What she saw crushed her. Victor, in a hot tub, with 3 other girls, all younger, all newer. One of them wearing the diamond necklace Arya had picked out for his birthday. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She smiled. But that smile? It wasn't love. It was calculation. That night, something inside her snapped. She stopped texting him daily, stopped asking where he was, stopped playing the game. Instead, she started documenting. Screenshots, voicemails, photos, audio recordings, a secret folder on her laptop labeled taxes. Every whisper, every lie. She began assembling a picture of Victor Langston no one else had ever dared to see in full. Not the billionaire, but the predator. And the more she uncovered, the more dangerous she became. Because this wasn't heartbreak. This was revenge. But even Arya knew, taking down a man like Victor Langston alone, it was suicide. She needed help. She didn't need friends. She needed accomplices. And she knew exactly where to find them. In Victor's court of ghosts, there were still a few women with unbared rage. 2 of them were already watching him closely. Amber Price, 21, a dancer with a temper and a past full of bar fights, eviction notices, and burned bridges. The kind of girl who trusted no one, except those who offered loyalty first. And Kayla Monroe, 24, a biochemistry major by day, sugar baby by night. Smart, quiet, always analyzing, always listening. To Victor, they were background noise. To Arya, they were weapons. Within weeks, the 3 of them were meeting in secret, whispering over cheap wine and dim lights, plotting something so bold it sounded impossible. But Arya didn't believe in impossible. She believed in payback. It started as a whisper. A what if, said Half in jest over a bottle of cheap Merlot on Amber's balcony. What if we just took him out? Arya didn't laugh. She didn't blink. She just stared at the skyline and said softly, "We have to be perfect." Amber paused, then grinned. That's how it began. 3 women, 1 plan, a billionaire who'd built his life on control, about to lose everything to the very girls he thought he owned. But Arya didn't want chaos. She wanted precision. She knew Victor's routines better than his own wife. The nights he stayed late, the pills he took before bed, the wines he preferred. The fact that Thursdays were always his reset night. That was the night the mansion emptied. Helen had book club in Pasadena. The housekeepers clocked out early. His bodyguard, a former Navy SEAL, left at 5 p.m. sharp, unless explicitly told otherwise. Victor used Thursdays for massages, wine, and whatever girl he felt like summoning. That would be their window. And Arya? She was going to make sure he invited her in. But first, they needed the right setup. Amber would be the force. She had the rage, the fire, the willingness to do what Arya couldn't. Kayla would be the brain, a tech whiz who knew how to spoof IP addresses, loop surveillance cameras, wipe fingerprints. And Arya? She was the face, the one Victor trusted, the key to the front gate, the name in the guest list, the voice that made him drop his guard. For weeks, they met in parking garages, empty apartments, and dark corners of L.A., whispering, planning, memorizing every inch of the Langston estate. But planning wasn't enough. Arya knew one misstep could land them in a cage for life, or worse, a morgue. Victor wasn't just some rich old man. He was powerful, connected, and dangerously unpredictable. And if his plan had any chance of success, it needed more than strategy. It needed rehearsal. So she found a place, an abandoned apartment above a dry cleaner's in East Hollywood. No lease, no neighbors, no questions. The smell of mildew hung in the walls. A broken fan clicked in the corner like a metronome for madness. They called it the studio. Amber hated it. Feels like a damn horror movie set, she muttered the first time they walked in. But Arya didn't flinch. She'd already mapped out the layout of Victor's master bedroom by memory, down to the dimensions between the chaise lounge and the minibar. She drew it on the floor with white chalk, marked XS where the bedposts would be, taped a fake thermostat to the wall where Victor always rested his glass. Then she handed Amber a practice blade. Rubber, but the weight was real. You'll need 5 clean strikes, Arya said coldly. Ribs, abdomen, upper thigh, collarbone, then the chest. Amber rolled her eyes. Since when are you an assassin? I'm not, Arya replied, her voice like steel. But I'm someone who can't afford mistakes. Over the next 2 weeks, they trained like it was war. Amber practiced stabbing into watermelons, figuring out angles, pressure, and how to make it silent. Kayla studied security systems with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. She ordered discarded circuit boards from eBay, hacked into outdated routers, and even practiced wiping fake fingerprints off thrifted doorknobs. "You know this is insane, right?" Kayla whispered one night, her hands trembling as she scrubbed a wine bottle with bleach. Arya didn't look up. "Only if we fail." But fear had begun to creep in, especially for Kayla. She wasn't like Arya. She didn't grow up in chaos or fight for survival. She had a little sister, a student loan, a future. So one night, she said it out loud. "I can't do this," she whispered in the dark, tears pooling in her eyes. "I thought we were just going to expose him, get him fired, shame him. Not this." Arya sat across from her, silent. Then she leaned in, her voice low but lethal. "You know what Victor does to girls who just walk away? He buries them, not with dirt, but with silence. He makes them disappear in courtrooms, in headlines, in their own minds. You think you'll be safe if you back out?" Kayla swallowed hard. Arya's hand rested on hers. "I'm not asking you to be brave forever. I'm asking you to be brave for one night." Kayla didn't sleep that night, but she stayed. Amber, on the other hand, never wavered. She sharpened her blade obsessively, even practiced wrist control with a butcher block and a slab of meat from Ralph's. Her anger was volcanic, constant and waiting, and Arya watched them both. She knew the risks, knew that trust in a crime like this was as fragile as breath. So she tested them. One night, she handed Amber a real knife, cold, curved, terrifying, and said simply, "Try it on me." Amber blinked. "What?" "Try it. See if you can do it. Look me in the eye and move your hand." Amber stared at her like she was insane. But Arya didn't move, didn't flinch. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "If you can't hurt me now, how do I know you'll hurt him when it matters?" Amber's jaw clenched. Her fingers trembled. She raised the knife, then stopped. Arya smiled. "Good. You're not a monster." She took the knife back and walked away, as if it were nothing. But Kayla saw it. She saw what Arya was really doing. Not building a team, not leading a plan. She was conditioning soldiers. And in some terrifying magnetic way, it worked. By the end of that second week, they were clockwork. Amber could cross the bedroom in 7 seconds. Kayla could disable a camera feed in 32. Arya could pour a glass of wine, fake a laugh, and lace it with sedative, all without breaking eye contact. They rehearsed over and over, late into the night. Sometimes they played jazz in the background, Victor's favorite genre. Sometimes they turned the lights red, like the glow of the Langston estate hallway. And each time they ran the drill, Arya whispered the same phrase before they left the scene. Nothing stolen, nothing touched, only him. But the plan nearly fell apart on a Monday. Victor called Arya, told her he was flying to Vancouver for a board meeting on Thursday. That was the night, their only chance. Arya smiled through the phone. "Oh, babe, that's disappointing. I had a surprise planned." Victor paused, then chuckled. "Postpone it. I'll be back Saturday." Arya's stomach dropped. "No," she said smoothly. "This one can't wait. You want to be here." He hesitated. She whispered. "It's soft." A pause. Then that same damn emoji. Winking face. He canceled the flight. And just like that, the plan was back on. But Arya didn't tell the girls about the call. She needed them focused, controlled, sharp. The next night, she bought 3 new burner phones, delivered one to each woman with a final message. "Tomorrow, we stop being ghosts." Kayla hacked into the home security firm, one Victor owned part of. She downloaded blueprints, learned camera blind spots, and rewrote code that would loop the video feed on demand. Amber practiced in secret how to stun a man without knocking him unconscious, where to stab, to disable without killing instantly, how to move a body if things went wrong. Arya handled the rest, the pills, the dress, the distraction. But the most critical part? The safe. Victor's safe was voice-activated, plus a 6-digit manual override. Arya had once asked him drunkenly what his code was. He'd laughed and said, "You'd never guess it. It's your birthday backward." He was wrong. She guessed it just fine. She didn't want the money. She wanted the revised will, the one where he promised to leave her everything. She needed it, not for greed, but for proof. Proof that what he'd offered wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was a contract. A future. A promise made and broken. The plan was tight, but still had holes. What if Victor didn't invite her that Thursday? What if someone else showed up? What if one of the girls broke? Arya didn't care. By now, she wasn't planning a crime. She was orchestrating a message. To Victor. To the media. To the world. That a man who turned girls into ghosts had finally created one who knew how to haunt him back. On Wednesday, the day before it all went down, Arya stood in her penthouse, silk robe on, hair pinned, staring into the mirror. She didn't see fear. She saw resolve. She picked up her phone and texted him. Tomorrow night, I have a surprise for you. Something soft. Victor replied 4 minutes later. Just one emoji. That was all she needed. It was happening. And none of them, Victor, the guards, the estate managers, the billion-dollar board members, none of them saw it coming. Because why would they? She was just another pretty girl in a long list. A disposable secret. A whisper. But whispers, they can become screams. And by the next night, the world would hear hers, written in blood. Thursday, 8:42 p.m. The Langston estate recognized Arya's license plate without question. The gate rolled open smoothly. Security didn't blink. She had been there dozens of times before. She wasn't alone. In the trunk of her Mercedes, Amber and Kayla lay curled beneath designer shopping bags and a faux fur throw. Silent. Ready. Inside the mansion, Victor Langston stood barefoot in his silk robe, a glass of Petrus in hand. Jazz floated through the air like warm mist. His routine down to the minute. He hadn't even locked the front door. He didn't have to. Arya walked in like she owned the place. She kissed his cheek, dropped her designer purse on the entry table, and flashed the kind of smile that once bought her everything. You look stunning tonight, he said, eyes hungry. I brought a surprise, she replied, voice smooth as honey. You're going to love it. She poured him a drink, just like she always did. Only this time, the wine in his glass had been laced with a crushed dose of temazepam, a sedative strong enough to slow his body, blur his thinking, but leave him awake. Exactly as planned. Victor took a sip, smiled, sat down on the velvet chaise by the fireplace. So what's the surprise? He asked. Friends, Arya purred. 2 of them. Victor's face dropped for a split second. You know I don't like surprises. This one, she whispered, you'll like. 9:17 p.m. Amber and Kayla slipped through the side hallway. Barefoot, gloved, dressed in black hoodies. Kayla held a duct tape roll. Amber? A stun gun tucked in her waistband, and a long, sharpened blade strapped to her thigh. Victor looked up as they entered. First amused, then confused, then afraid. What the hell is this? He tried to stand, but his body was already slowing, the sedative clouding his limbs. Amber struck first, a direct stun to the throat. Victor collapsed, gagging, arms flailing. Kayla rushed in, wrapped duct tape around his wrists before he could scream. Arya? She never moved. She stood in the doorway, watching everything with chilling stillness. Victor looked up at her. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a soft, panic breath. What he saw wasn't love. It was betrayal, wearing the face he'd once kissed. Arya stepped forward, leaned in just inches from his face. This is your legacy. Amber pulled out the knife. And then, the first stab, straight into his ribcage. Victor screamed, or tried to. Blood sprayed from his lips. His body convulsed. Then came the second stab, and the third, and the fourth. Amber's rage poured out like she'd waited her whole life for this moment. Kayla turned away, shaking. Her knees buckled. She started sobbing. Arya didn't blink. She watched Victor writhe beneath the silken blood, his expensive robe now a crimson flag of every lie he'd ever told. He reached out one last time, a trembling hand, a final plea. Arya took his fingers in hers, then leaned close and said softly, "Thank you for making me exactly who I needed to be." Amber plunged the knife in again. 42 stab wounds. Victor Langston died without his watch being stolen, without his safe being touched. Except, Arya knew the code. She walked to the safe, entered the 6-digit passcode, her birthday, backward. Inside, cash, jewelry, documents, and one envelope, the revised will, the one where he'd promised everything to her. She took it, slipped it into her bag. Kayla wiped the doorknobs with sanitizing spray. Amber tossed the bloody knife into a duffel lined with bleach pads. And just before they left, Arya sprayed a fine mist of jasmine perfume, just enough to confuse the scent trail for dogs. They looped the cameras again, using Kayla's hack. They exited through the garage. Calm, precise. No one saw them leave. But before she walked out, Arya returned to Victor's body. Kneeling beside him, she kissed his cold forehead. Sweet dreams, Mr. Langston. At 10:27 p.m., housekeeper Lucia arrived early for her shift. She would be the one to find him. Naked, pale, soaked in blood, the horror of his secret life bleeding into the marble floors. And outside the mansion, in the hills of Beverly Hills, the world still believed Victor Langston was a saint. That illusion would die with the morning sun. Detective Marlon Briggs had been with the LAPD Homicide Division for 18 years. He'd seen it all. Gang hits, celebrity overdoses staged as suicides, families torn apart by inheritance and infidelity. But the Langston case? This one felt designed. It was too clean, too controlled, too silent. Victor Langston had been found with 42 stab wounds, naked in his own bed. No forced entry. No signs of struggle beyond the body itself. His watch still on his wrist. His safe untouched, locked tight. Security cameras? All disabled due to a routine firmware update, according to the private company managing the system. Briggs had heard that one before. He stood in that master bedroom longer than anyone else, hands on his hips, staring at the blood-soaked silk and the decanter still half full on the bar cart. Something about it screamed. This wasn't passion. This was strategy. The first rule of homicide? Rule out the family. Briggs started with the wife. Helen Langston was found sipping tea in her best friend's garden in Pasadena when detectives showed up to deliver the news. She didn't scream. She didn't faint. She just sat still for 5 full seconds, then whispered. Finally, when they brought her in for questioning, Helen didn't bother to pretend. We hadn't shared a bed in 15 years, she said matter-of-factly. I knew he had girls. I stopped asking questions after the third burner phone. Briggs leaned forward. Did you know how many? Helen paused. Not all of them. Just enough to lose respect. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. Her grief wasn't sadness. It was disgust that had fermented into quiet fury. Next up, the children. Richard Langston, the eldest, mid-40s, a high-profile entertainment lawyer in L.A., immediately lawyered up. He refused to answer anything without counsel present, which in itself told Briggs all he needed to know. Richard had something to protect. Susan, the daughter, flew in for Boston. She was a pediatric surgeon, calm and meticulous. She cried during the interview, called her father deeply flawed and emotionally absent, and admitted they hadn't spoken in nearly a year. But it was Eric, the youngest, who raised Briggs' radar. Eric didn't seem surprised. He didn't ask how his father died. He didn't even flinch when the words multiple stab wounds were mentioned. He had enemies, Eric said flatly. A man like that always does. Briggs narrowed his eyes. You think this was business-related? Eric shook his head. No, I think it was personal. He was obsessed with some girl, younger than me. She had him wrapped. Briggs leaned forward. Do you know her name? Eric shrugged. No, but she was everywhere. Penthouse parties, trips to Santa Barbara. One of the other girls told me he called her Mrs. Langston in private. Briggs' pen paused. He knew exactly who it was. Arya Taylor. She wasn't hard to find. She showed up at Victor's funeral in a black silk dress and oversized sunglasses, crying louder than the widow. She clutched Victor's photo like a grieving wife, kissed the casket twice, and hired a defense attorney before the autopsy was even finalized. That was a red flag, a big one. Briggs brought her in for questioning under the pretense of being next of kin support. Arya played the role to perfection. Soft-spoken, devastated, cooperative. Victor was everything to me, she sniffled, dabbing at dry eyes. He was generous. He was lonely. He just needed someone to see him. She even handed over her phone voluntarily. It was spotless. Too spotless. Briggs' tech team confirmed it had been factory reset 2 days prior to the murder. Arya claimed a weird crash during an update. A lie so obvious it insulted his intelligence. Still, without hard evidence, there wasn't much he could do. Even before that 6-second clip emerged, Detective Marlon Briggs had already begun playing the long game. He didn't believe in brute force. He believed in pressure. Briggs had seen women like Arya before. Smart, strategic, always 2 steps ahead. But where others saw a manipulator, he saw something else entirely. A tactician. So he tried something risky. He invited her back to the station for clarification. No cuffs. No formal interrogation. Just coffee, soft lighting, and a polite tone. Arya arrived in a silk blouse and dark lipstick, hair tied back like she had something to prove. "You said Victor had enemies," Briggs began. "Did he ever mention names?" She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Detective, Victor had everything. When a man like that breathes too loud, someone's offended." He smirked. "And when someone like you stops texting him, does he get offended?" The question landed sharper than expected. Arya's smile twitched. Briggs leaned forward, voice calm but loaded. "Do you miss him, Arya?" Silence. Then she exhaled and said softly, "I miss the version of him I thought was real." He logged that line, word for word, because behind the poetic grief, he sensed something else. Distance, like she was separating herself from the man and the murder. After she left, Briggs told his team, "She didn't crack. She prepared for me." So when the surveillance footage came in, the blurry clip, the hallway shadows, Briggs knew this wasn't just a homicide anymore. This was going to be a war in court. And Arya? She wasn't walking into it alone. Her lawyer, Ronald Avery, was a surgical weapon in a suit. Harvard grad, cross-examination legend. And most dangerously, he believed in her. Victor Langston created victims, Avery told the press. My client was simply the one who refused to stay one. At trial, he controlled the room like a conductor. His cross of Detective Briggs was precise, borderline theatrical. "You say the crime scene was clean," Avery said. "Too clean, in fact. So let's entertain another possibility. Could this have been the work of professionals? A hired hit." Briggs stayed calm. Professionals don't leave 6-second clips on corrupted servers. Or take monogrammed perfume bottles. Laughter stirred in the gallery. The judge silenced it. Avery pressed on. "And yet, no blood found on my client. No DNA. No fingerprints. Just a blurry silhouette in a hallway and a revised will she claims she never saw." Briggs folded his arms. She factory reset her phone 2 days after the murder. That's not grief. That's a cleanup job. Avery smirked. Or trauma. The jury listened closely. America did too. But Arya? She was still a ghost on the stand. When asked about Victor, she gave nothing but velvet. "He made me feel safe. He was generous. I never wanted him dead." But then came day 9. The prosecution dropped the bombshell. Victor's voice recording. The courtroom went silent as the jury heard the dead man's voice echo off the walls. "Her name is Arya Taylor. She thinks I'm going to leave everything to her. She's wrong. If anything happens to me, start with her." Even Avery couldn't mask the impact. He objected. Overruled. The spell cracked. But not for Arya. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Just folded her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead, like she'd already accepted the ending. That's when Briggs knew. She hadn't planned to walk away clean. She planned to walk away remembered. And in some twisted way, she had, until a small miracle appeared. One of the deleted surveillance backups, recovered from a corrupted drive in Langston's private security server, contained a 6-second video fragment. Grainy, dark, but clear enough to show 3 silhouettes moving through the upstairs hallway at 9:16 p.m. on the night of the murder. The first figure? Female. Slim. Confident. Wearing the same dress Arya had on in the funeral photos. Behind her, 2 more shadows, one noticeably holding something long and sharp. Briggs felt the chill creep up his spine. "We've got movement," he muttered. But movement wasn't enough. He needed a voice. He needed someone to crack. And he knew exactly where to start. Because predators may die silent. But accomplices? They talk. It took exactly 5 days. 5 days from the moment Detective Marlon Briggs saw that grainy hallway footage to the knock on an apartment door in Inglewood, where Amber Price had been hiding out at her cousin's place. Amber wasn't the type to run scared. Tattooed knuckles, sharp jaw, eyes like she'd seen hell and memorized the route back. But when the cops came knocking, she folded. Fast. At first, she denied everything. Said she was in Vegas. Said she didn't even know Victor Langston. Briggs slid a photo across the table. Victor's body. Silk sheets soaked in blood. 42 stab wounds. Amber flinched. Then came the video, still blurry but damning. Her silhouette. The blade. The timestamp. 9:16 p.m. Briggs leaned in. We already know who planned it. But the one who held the knife? That's the one who dies in a cage. Silence. You talk now. Maybe you get to see daylight again before you're 60. Maybe. Amber stared at the photo for a long time, then said 2 words. It was Arya, and the dam broke. She told him everything. How Arya had approached her. How she brought Kayla into the mix. How they'd studied floor plans, timed the guard shifts, downloaded YouTube tutorials on looping security cameras. Arya was the queen, Amber said. She picked the night, the method, even the damn playlist. Briggs asked why she agreed to it. Amber shrugged. Because he was a predator. And because Arya made me feel like I was finally worth something. She gave him the name Kayla Monroe and told him where to find her. 48 hours later, Kayla was picked up outside a university library near USC. She didn't resist. She didn't even ask why. She just started crying the moment the cuffs clicked. In the holding room, she told a slightly different story. Said she thought it was going to be a scare job. Arya told me we were just going to send a message, she said between sobs. She never said kill him. Briggs didn't buy it. Not fully. But he didn't need to. He had enough. And Arya Taylor? She had no idea what was coming. At 7:12 a.m. the next morning, police stormed her luxury apartment in Century City. She answered the door in silk pajamas. Mascara smudged. Phone in one hand. Champagne flute in the other. She was arrested without incident. Her mugshot hit the internet by lunch. The headlines came faster than the cuffs. Instagram model turned murder queen. She loved him. Then she killed him. Billionaire's final affair ends in blood. Arya didn't cry, didn't scream. She just stared dead ahead, like she knew the game was up, like she planned this far and no further. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Victor Langston had left behind one final insurance policy. A black fireproof box hidden in his private study, locked behind a fake bookshelf panel. Inside, 3 USB drives, an old-school voice recorder, and a handwritten note. In case I disappear. On one of the drives, a voice memo. Victor's voice, raspy, deliberate, dated 2 weeks before his murder. Her name is Arya Taylor, 23. She thinks I'm going to leave everything to her. She's wrong. I've seen that look before. In her eyes. She's planning something. She's smart. Smarter than the others. If anything happens to me, start with her. When that recording played in court, you could hear a pin drop. The trial began 8 months later. The courtroom was packed. National networks streamed the proceedings live. Influencers, activists, retired real estate execs, even a few of Victor's old mistresses, disguised in sunglasses and scarves, filled the gallery. The prosecution painted Arya as a textbook manipulator, a girl who rose from nothing, seduced a billionaire, then gutted him when his promises didn't deliver. This was no accident, the DA said. This was orchestrated, premeditated. This was revenge dressed in silk. But the defense came swinging too. Arya's lawyer, Ronald Avery, cut a sharp silhouette in court. Calm, unblinking. Victor Langston built an empire on the backs of young women, he argued. He groomed them, controlled them, paid them to stay quiet. Arya didn't kill a man. She escaped a monster. They presented records, NDA contracts, payouts, Instagram DMs dripping with manipulation. And yet, the prosecution had 2 cooperating witnesses, a voice recording, digital evidence, and, most damning of all, a copy of a revised will found in Arya's bag. The one Victor never filed. The one naming her sole beneficiary. But Victor's final move? It crushed whatever chance she had left. His actual will, revised 2 days before his death, was recovered by his accountant and authenticated. It removed Arya completely, and instead left $400 million to a private trust funding women's shelters, therapy programs, and legal aid for abuse survivors. The room gasped. Even the judge seemed shaken. On day 15, the jury returned. Verdict: guilty, first-degree murder. Sentence: life without parole. Kayla Monroe, 18 years under a plea deal. Amber Price, 25 years. Arya didn't react. She sat still, didn't cry, didn't blink. But as they cuffed her wrists, she leaned toward the court reporter and whispered something, just loud enough to be caught on the record. He still won. The trial was over. But the story of Victor Langston and Arya Taylor had only just begun to haunt America. The name Langston, once associated with wealth, vision, and philanthropy, became a scar. A cautionary tale. A curse. Universities returned his endowments. Museums removed his name from their walls. A wing at the Children's Cancer Hospital he helped fund was quietly renamed after a former nurse. No press release. Just silence. Even his closest allies in politics and business issued statements like, "I didn't really know him. We were never close." It's shocking, truly, but the most deafening silence came from Helen Langston, his wife of 52 years. She filed a petition to legally dissolve all financial connection to the Langston estate. She changed her last name, sold her home, moved to Napa Valley. She left only one final statement behind, a handwritten letter sent to a small local paper in Santa Barbara. Some women spend a lifetime loving a man who never really existed. I'm done. His children disappeared from the public eye. Richard Langston, the eldest, tried to seize control of what was left of the empire. But the court-appointed executor made sure every last dollar in Victor's estate went to his final wish, a trust for women he'd once silenced. Susan Langston returned to Boston. She never spoke publicly again. Eric, the youngest, gave one interview to Vanity Fair. When asked what he'd learned from his father, he said, "He taught me how to make money, not how to be a man." But the ripple effects went far beyond blood. Over 24 women, former companions of Victor, came forward after the verdict. Some filed lawsuits. Others simply wanted to be heard. They banded together and formed a nonprofit. They called it the Arya Project. It wasn't named to glorify her. It was named because she was the one who cracked the silence. The Arya Project offers shelter, legal aid, and therapy to women trapped in exploitative relationships with powerful older men. Their slogan? From ghosts to voices. Arya Taylor, inmate number 57601, now resides at Central California Women's Facility. She doesn't speak to the media. She teaches yoga in the prison yard, reads philosophy, refuses interviews. But once, just once, a journalist mailed her a single question. "Do you regret killing Victor Langston?" Her reply came weeks later, handwritten on a torn piece of legal paper, in red ink. "He turned girls into ghosts. I just gave one ghost a face." Amber Price now works prison laundry. She's trying to earn sentence reductions with good behavior. Kayla Monroe is scheduled for parole in 2034. She writes weekly letters to her younger sister. She never mentions Victor's name. And Victor? He's buried in Forest Lawn Memorial Park, beneath a $60,000 marble headstone that reads, "Visionary, builder, husband, father." But that's not what the world remembers. The world remembers the blood, the lies, the empire of glass and silence. Because Victor Langston didn't just build towers. He built cages. And in the end, the very girls he once controlled tore them down, brick by brick, blade by blade. The aftermath didn't end with the trial. Late-night talk shows dissected every moment, every courtroom expression, every whispered quote. Documentaries were pitched before the jury even returned. A streaming giant greenlit a limited series titled Langston's Last Mistress. But not everyone wanted to watch. For women who had once lived under Victor's care, the media frenzy reeked of the same voyeurism that kept them silent for years. So they fought back, this time with voices, not whispers. Over a dozen former companions published essays, memoirs, blog posts. One of them, under the pen name #89, wrote, "We weren't prostitutes. We weren't victims, either. We were currency. Aria just cashed the last check." Colleges launched investigations into donor funds tied to Langston Global. One Ivy League school returned a $22 million endowment, stating, "No amount of generosity erases exploitation." In Beverly Hills, where Victor once ruled the room with a glass of Bordeaux and a gold-plated grin, invitations stopped arriving. People stopped name-dropping him at fundraisers. Even his closest allies began denying him in polished statements and tight smiles. But the most haunting shift? A new term began trending in social media spaces for young women in sponsored relationships. Ghost protocol. It referred to the emotional pattern Aria described, the isolation, control, and disappearance of identity under wealthy men. Forums filled with anonymous posts. "He called me as Aria. I blocked him today. My safe word is Langston. I finally used it." Victor Langston had become more than a man. He had become a warning. And Aria, whether she meant to or not, became the girl who lit the match.